Hello, my name is Bonnie, and this is my channel, A Knitter Obsessed. This is my knitting podcast where I talk about all things knitting currently going on in my life. And today I have something just a little bit different for you guys. So normally I do just normal podcast updates where I talk about my knitting and my projects and what I've got going on. But today I wanted to tell you guys the 8 things that I have done in the last couple of years that have really leveled up my knitting, that have gotten it to the quality that it's at now, the frequency that it's at now and the speed, and then also just the sheer level of obsessiveness that I have over it. So whether you are viewing this as a how-to guide to level up your own knitting, or possibly like some words of caution if you want to avoid being quite as obsessed with it as I am, this should be a fun list. So, and like I said, I stand by all of these steps. They will absolutely transform your knitting if you're not doing them already. And even if you followed every single step on this list, that does not mean you would become as obsessed with knitting as me. I think that's a me thing. I think I just really took it to an extreme. I've actually been knitting less lately because I was starting to hurt my hands a little bit because I was getting a little too into it. So, all jokes aside, don't worry, you're not going to become addicted to knitting in an unhealthy way if you follow the steps on this list. So before we get into it, I did just want to mention I'm talking about how to level up your knitting, and I'm not wearing any knitwear. It feels a little wrong, but it is warm here. We're having some very lovely spring weather here in California, and I didn't really feel like wearing a sweater. And then also today was just a busy day for me. I've been running around and running errands and cleaning my house and working on homework, and I realized I needed to film, and so I put on some makeup really quick and sat down to film, but this is basically just what I've looked like today. I'm just trying to sneak in a bit of filming in between other things I have going on, so I didn't have time to go and pick out a perfect knitwear outfit because I wear my knits a lot, but housework and like errand days on when it's warm, and I just was gonna get messy and dirty today, so I don't always wear Mondays like that. I am, however, maybe going to try and get a couple rows in while we talk on a project. We'll see. I might not really get anywhere. I sometimes don't do well at the knit and chat thing. But I am working on the sleeve for my shirt jacket. So this guy is, ooh, it's big. I gotta really lean back. Hard to show off right now because she's all rumply and really needs a good block. I think that's going to really transform this project. But this is the Mouse Shirt Jacket by Ozetta. It's knit in Wool Dreamers Manchalopi, which is an unspun yarn that you hold double. And then I have the body done. The ribbings all bound off. I have the button bands done on both sides. I've even sewed on buttons. Where are they? Buttons. And I finished the collar, which in the pattern it does have a double folded collar, but I am not double folding this. So if you are interested in more about this, you can check out my next podcast update where I will probably have a lot to say about this one. So, but I'm really liking it. So I'm working on the sleeve right now and just working through all these decreases. So like I said, we'll see how much I get done. The unspun yarn takes just a little bit of focus to work with, not a lot. And then trying to talk to a camera is sometimes harder than I remember it being. So, and then one last order of business before we dig into it, but this video is sponsored by Unravelled. Unravelled is a knitting kit company that sends everything you need to complete the project of your choice directly to your doorstep. This includes easy to follow patterns with helpful tutorials, all of the notions that you need, luxury yarns, and knitting needles if you need them. They are focused primarily at beginners, with several of their kits being open to people learning to knit for the first time, and so they are a great gift for someone you know that you might want to share the gift of knitting with, or for yourself if you want to either practice your skills and improve them, or if maybe you are watching my channel but haven't tried knitting yourself yet. They're a great place to start. While they are focused on beginners, they do have kits for all skill levels, so everyone should be able to find something that they want over there, and I do highly recommend going and giving their website a look. One of their main focuses is on the mental health benefits that knitting can bring you. And as someone who knits primarily to cope with my own anxiety, I really love that this is the focus of their product because I really believe in this aspect of knitting a lot. I use it all the time. If this all sounds interesting to you, and I do really recommend them, Unravelled is a great company. You can get a 10% discount using the links that I have down below. Those are affiliate links, so if you use them, they will help out the channel. And The other way that you can get the discount is if you go to unravelled.store and enter the code AKnitterObsessed, all one word, at checkout. Either path will get you that discount, so you can try this out for yourself. Thank you, Unravelled, for sponsoring this video. All right, getting into it. So like I said, I've got 8 tips. And so these are things that I implemented in my own life over the last couple of years that have honestly revolutionized my knitting. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be a knitting YouTube podcaster, or that I would own even one knit sweater, let alone many. I don't know how many I own. It's a lot now. Or that I would even be like someone people described as a knitter. Like, that'd be like, oh, Bonnie, she's the knitter. I wouldn't have believed you, because it wasn't what I did 2 years ago. I've been knitting my whole life pretty much. My Nana taught me when I was probably like 10 or so. And so I've been just kind of casually knitting off and on ever since then, but in like little spurts. Like, I would just do a couple projects, kind of lose interest, go a couple years, do a couple more projects. You know, it was very here and there. And whenever I got into knitting, I was very into it and I loved it, but it wasn't like an identifying thing for me. Like, it wasn't something people were like, oh yeah, Bonnie, she's the knitter. Like I said, no. In fact, 2 years ago, my main hobby was playing Dungeons and Dragons and painting little minis for Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, it's just very interesting how much can change in just a couple of years. So one of the main things that changed immediately was that I started knitting every day. I started carrying projects around with me. I started picking up projects when I had a few minutes here and there, even if I only got a row or 2 in. I just made a point that even if I didn't knit a lot every day, I was knitting every single day. And what this does is twofold. So it creates a habit. And so I have had like situations, like when we went on our vacation to Mexico, they confiscated my needles at the airport. So yeah, don't try and take metal knitting needles through the Cancun airport. They will get taken away. And then our flight got delayed, and then our flight got rescheduled for the next day. And so I went a whole day without having access to my knitting or my knitting needles. And it felt weird. Like, I felt uncomfortable not knitting for a full, like, more than 24 hours. Because it's a habit for me. Like, it just feels like I'm checking off a needed part of my day when I knit every day. Like, it feels almost like brushing my teeth on some level. And so you create this habit, and it just becomes easier and easier and easier to pick up your knitting. And so that's the first part. And then the second part is that the more you do it, the more you develop the muscle memory, the more you just keep working at it, the neater and just more uniform your knitting gets in general. So just my tension has gotten, it was never, like I said, I've been knitting since I was 10, so my tension had gotten quite a bit better by the time I'd made all these changes. I didn't have like major problems with it. But in the last couple of years, I can see a huge difference in just the actual quality of my knitting. Like, it just, by practice. You practice and practice, and it gets better and better and better. And it makes a really, really big difference. So that's the first one, is just knitting every day. And like I said, I would have a small project that you can put in your purse. So for me, that's like a sock or a hat or something that's easy to just kind of like shove in there and forget about. Like, maybe not your fanciest yarn, but just easy to pick up and knit if you're like sitting and waiting for a doctor's appointment or something like that. The other one is having projects of different difficulties, so that, you know, if you really want to knit but your friend wants to hang out, like, take a nice stockinette project to the coffee shop and hang out with your friend and get some knitting in then. And then, you know, on days when you're feeling a little more antisocial and you want to focus on your knitting, then you have your more complicated projects. And then, you know, like I said, just, you don't need to knit for a long time. So keeping that in mind, that it's worthwhile to just pick up a project and knit a row or 2 and then put it back down and move on. And I like to very purposefully keep projects in stages where I can just pick it up and put it down. So I try not to like leave every single one of my projects in a stage where I like need to pick up armhole stitches or something, or you kind of just have to sit down and get it done. No, like maybe one is a little bit like abandoned in that stage, but the other one is just in the middle of a sleeve and good to go, and you can pick it up and put it down as you need to. So those have been my tics. Those have been my techniques to get knitting into my life on a daily basis. Step 2, and this will probably happen naturally once you start knitting every day, but is to really nail down your preferences. So, and across the board. So one of the very first ones for me, and this would actually, I would say it wasn't in this last round where I got really obsessed, but it was like the knitting surge I had right before this. So it set me up for success this, most recent time around. But it was to really nail down how I hold my needles and my yarn. That makes my hands feel the best. So I've always been an English thrower, and I did not change that. That is very much my preferred method of knitting, and I have no desire to do anything different. I've tried continental. It just really doesn't work for me. But I learned how to hold my yarn in my hands. And so I hold it differently for unspun because I want to tension it less. But typically when I'm holding my yarn, I wrap it around my middle two fingers like this. And if I want less tension, I keep it at the tips of my fingers. And if I want more tension, I keep it at the base of my fingers. And then as I'm knitting, I kind of flick and just, flick over with my index finger to wrap it around. And for me, that was a game changer. My tension got better. I wasn't dropping my yarn. I wasn't confused about where my yarn was. Suddenly I could knit without looking. And like I said, I made this change a few years ago, but when I picked knitting back up again, that was the thing that I noticed right away. Like there wasn't a learning curve. There wasn't like a rebuilding the muscle memory. There was, I just knew where my yarn was, and it was easy, and I can just pick it up and start knitting and not have to think about it. So that's a huge one, but preferences go beyond that. So I also started to figure out what types of projects I like, what types of yarn I like, what colors I like even. It's not that I don't know what my favorite colors are, but it's easy to get kind of swept up in yarn, I think, a little bit because it's all so beautiful. And then starting to learn like, okay, yes, I love all these colors of yarns, but which ones do I actually want in my wardrobe? Am I just getting like starstruck, or are these actually my colors? That's a huge learning lesson. What else? Once I got into garments, getting my fit preferences. My first sweater was definitely a size too big. I've had other sweaters that are a little too small. I've had, all of those things. And my fit preferences definitely vary based on the construction of the garment, and I'm very slowly building up all of my preferences. So that's very easy for me to pick projects that I'm going to like, and then pick sizes within those projects that I'm going to like. But it takes a lot of trial and error to get a lot of that figured out, and it does take time. But once you start getting your preferences, it just makes the whole process feel a lot smoother, and it takes away that like initial hesitation or like tendency to overthink that I know I personally can get when I go to start a knitting project. And I feel like that overthinking feeling will sometimes slow me down or make me like not want to start something. And now that I'm starting to chip away at those excuses, I'm so much more capable of just picking a pattern, picking a yarn, and just going for it and trusting the process. And even though I'm going a little faster with the decision making, I'm liking what I make more. So yeah, finding what works for you across like every single category is like the journey that you need to go on if you want to level up your knitting. And it's not going to happen overnight, and it is going to take some time, and it is going to take some trial and error. But, if you're taking notes, if you're paying attention, if you're kind of storing this information somewhere so you can come back to it later, it's going to make a big difference. Number 3 is kind of directly off of this, which is now that you have your preferences, you need to knit what you are excited about. So not just what you like, what you think you're gonna need, what, you need to be like stoked on that project, like just obsessed is the name of my channel. And probably not for every project. I do knit some things that are just like useful, and I do knit gifts sometimes that I'm not like over the moon about, but I know someone will love it. Like, I'm not saying I am like losing my mind over every single project, but I probably have something on the needles all of the time that I am absolutely over the moon about. And that keeps it exciting. So even when you're working on something that you aren't as excited about, you know you have this project over here that's like just gonna be so good. And because it's a hobby, it's supposed to be fun. And so I just feel like in the past, what I would do is the knitting would start to be, like I said, I would work on developing the habit, I'd work on knitting every day, but it would just start to feel like a chore. Like I was like doing my knitting homework almost. And that's not the point. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be having a good time. And there might be portions of projects that feel like a slog. There might be, you might not love every single second that you're knitting. And I've had things where I don't like the process as much and I just really want the product and all that. But it should be exciting. It should make you feel good. You should be excited to pick up your needles. And so for me right now, honestly, it is the Mile Shirt Jacket because I'm loving working with the unspun yarn. I'm loving the shape and like the construction of the finished product. Like it's just been fun to knit. Like there's something really satisfying about this yarn at this gauge in this project that I'm absolutely over the moon and loving and have been having a ton of fun picking up every single time I pick it up. So you want to make sure you're picking projects like that. And know that if you're not liking something, it's okay to frog it or put it aside or take a break. This is for you. And you are allowed to do it however you want to do it. So you should do it in a way that makes you excited. Number 4, we're staying on the excitement trend. Get excited about fiber types and characteristics. So this was, I think, I think I said the main one was, knitting every day and creating the habit, but this is like maybe a close second of like one of the biggest things that overhauled my knitting. Because looking back, I have like just never been someone who uses the recommended yarn for a project. I do on occasion, like I am on this project, and it has happened before, but for the most part, I just see a pattern and then I would go and find yarn in the right weight, and then I would move on. And I wouldn't look at the fiber type, I wouldn't look at any of the characteristics of like the recommended yarn, and I would just hope for the best and wing it. And a lot of the times it did not work out. So I had just this history in the past of projects where I just made horrible fiber choices over and over and over again and had no idea why it wasn't working. And I finally, when I got back into knitting this last time, I discovered Knitting YouTube. I discovered a lot more online resources. I discovered some books about fiber types and stuff like that. And I finally learned what different fiber types do and what they're known for and what their characteristics are and why they're good for certain projects and bad for others. And once you learn those rules, you don't then have to like live by them. Like you can learn that, plant fibers aren't particularly great for cables because cables really want that memory and elasticity. And then you can choose to knit a cotton cabled sweater, but you can do it with intention and with the knowledge of how that cotton's going to behave and how to account for it and how to adjust for it. And so it was learning those rules that then made it so much more of a creative endeavor for me, and I got so much more excited about knitting as a result. So not only were my projects more successful because I actually knew what my yarn was going to do and how it was going to behave, which was huge. And I'm not saying I haven't made some fiber bad choices since then, but I've made a lot fewer. So the projects are more successful. I'm having more fun picking the yarn and pairing it with patterns and all that. And it's so much more of like an interesting experiment when you go off the rails. Like it's not so much of like a cross your fingers and hope for the best. It's more of like making an informed guess and then like testing that hypothesis. And I come from a science background, so I might be sounding a little nerdy right now, but it became the most fun thing for me and I still absolutely love it. And so it's really fun to look at a project and be like, oh, it really needs a rustic yarn. It really needs like this specific fiber type, and then like going on a hunt for the perfect yarn, or having some yarn with like some very specific characteristics and being like, what pattern is going to bring out the qualities of this yarn? And really the whole thing just feels like the most fun puzzle. So that might be a little bit nerdy and it might not be the reason you should get excited about fiber type, but if nothing else, you should teach yourself about fiber type and fiber characteristics so that your projects are more successful. Because if you continue, and I know this from experience, but if you keep making bad fiber choices over and over and over again, it's just discouraging because it's a lot of hard work to then not have the result that you were hoping for. And it happens every now and then to all of us, but when it happens over and over again, it really is very discouraging. And so learn about your fibers and you will have a way better time. And that is, real quick caveat, that is not to say that you need to like dig into expensive fibers or anything like that. Like, you can knit a whole bunch of stuff in acrylic and that's totally fine, but you need to learn about how acrylic behaves and how to block it because it's a little different than blocking wool, and how to work, there are tips and tricks to learn for every single type of fiber, and it will help you a lot no matter what type of fiber you're looking at. Number 5, and this might just be a personal one for me, but I found that it's a really fun form of inspiration, but I replaced, for the most part, scrolling on Ravelry, just like scrolling through patterns. I replaced like my doom scrolling on Instagram for just kind of scrolling through Ravelry. And I don't do it all the time. I still scroll on Instagram quite a bit, but when I feel myself getting kind of like bogged down by like, social media and the world that way, scrolling through patterns is really nice. Like, there's oftentimes some really interesting ones in there. There's really great inspiration. I don't really buy patterns until I need to knit them. And so, but I will add them to my favorites when I really like them. I'll go down through rabbit holes when I like discover a new designer that I really like, and I'll start going through all of their patterns. And it's a nice way to have this like inspiration in the back of your mind that has you thinking about knitting even when you're not knitting. And also, bonus points, gives you a little bit of break from the social media algorithms that just sort of run our lives. And that being said, I know Ravelry, scrolling through it, is still a social media algorithm, but in a different way. I feel like you know what I'm saying. I know a lot of people use Pinterest for this. Pinterest has just never been my favorite, and I don't have a habit of getting on it, but it would be a very similar idea. So if you wanted to look at knitting patterns over on Pinterest, or just whatever your choice of like pattern inspiration is, but taking a few minutes out of every day to just sort of scroll and get some background inspiration is a really fun way to just slightly level up how much you're thinking about your knitting and opening up your mind for, expanding your creativity, expanding the types of projects you're going to do in the future, because you're exposing yourself to all sorts of different ideas. Speaking of opening yourself up to different ideas, number 6 is to try new things constantly. So don't get me wrong, I always have 1 or 2 projects that are just simple going at the same time. I like a sock, or I'm currently working on the second of a very large blanket project, and so I've already knit the whole thing once, I'm knitting it again, I don't have to think about that project at all, and it is always going on in the background. But I almost always like to have some project that has something different about it that I've never done before. So for some context, it's been a little over a year since I knit my first garment. And so I feel like everything has been new since then. So like, obviously that was my first sweater. And then later I did my first drop shoulder. I did my first, so all the constructions got to be first. Different types of yarn that I'm working with I consider first. So like, this is my very first unspun yarn. So it's very simple construction, but learning to work with the yarn has been very, very interesting. And I have actually made myself do sewn bind-offs with the unspun yarn. So, I'm really making myself learn how to work with it at like possibly the most annoying way possible. But, I'm learning a lot. I learned how to knit my first sock, and then I've been working through the different sock heel constructions. I feel like new designers sometimes count in this, where you're just learning how they write patterns and how their charts look and stuff like that. No matter how big or small or simple or complex the new thing you're trying is, it's still going to drive you just towards being more excited about your project, towards feeling more accomplished as you work through it. It's going to stretch your brain a little bit and, level up your skills little by little as you go forward. And that's so much fun. It makes the hobby so much fun if you are slowly peeking under all the covers and pulling back all of the secrets and just learning all of the little things in the nooks and crannies of the hobby. Like, it's so much fun, and it's one of the best ways to keep the hobby feeling fresh and exciting as you go forward. Number 7, and this is another absolute game changer for me, and you do not need to do it the way that I went about it, but it is to share your knitting, to talk about your knitting. And so obviously I did that by putting myself in front of a camera and talking to YouTube about it and to all of you. And I'm not necessarily saying that you need to go do that. That might feel a bit extreme. For me, that was a really fun way to do it because I didn't have a huge knitting community around me, and I had a lot of things to say and not a lot of people to say them to, and so I decided to say them to you guys. But it can just be talking to a friend. It can be sharing about your knits on social media. It can be joining a local knitting group and talking about your knitting there. It could be randomly talking someone's ear off, like a coworker or something, about what you've been knitting, if they're cool with it. Like, don't just bombard people with your knitting if they're really not into it. But most people are happy to hear about it. But just talking about it, talking through your projects, talking through like challenges you've had or things you've learned or big successes, like, it's huge. It makes such a big difference, and it is so much fun to just, I don't know, get some of those like swirly thoughts that we have in our heads all of the time out into the world. And it makes it so much more tangible, and it makes it feel like just a much more important part of your life in a very valid and real way. And so, yeah, that is, I think, a huge part. If you want to level up your knitting, if you want to knit more, if you want to really make knitting a part of who you are, talk about your knitting and don't hold it in. Just let it be out there, because I promise you, people actually care, and they care quite a bit, and they are very excited to hear about it. And it's fun to talk about it because, like I said, I'm thinking about it all the time. So my head usually has some sort of knitting content swirling on through it, and it feels good to get it out. All right, and number 8, and the last one, and one that I think for some is very natural and for others takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's to use your knits. So don't spend hours and hours and hours knitting something just to put it on a shelf and never ever wear or use it. And so, especially if you knit garments, make sure you wear your garments. And so part of this is trying to knit things that fit your actual style so that you're comfortable wearing them. But another part of this is to just don't treat your knits like they're too precious. Don't treat your knits like they have to be saved for a special occasion or the right event or the right outfit or whatever. No, just wear them. Most of my knits are pretty casual. I have a couple that look a little nicer, and it took me a little bit where I was like, I don't know, does this look like I'm overdressing? And I'm like, who cares? I knit this. I'm proud of it. I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear it to the grocery store. I'm going to wear it on walks. I'm going to wear it lounging on the couch. I have slept in a couple of my mohair sweaters because I don't find mohair itchy, and it was freezing cold. And I was like, you know what? This is comfortable, and I'm very happy about it. I use hats when I'm having a bad hair day. My cowls used to be my number one most worn thing that I made, but since I've made so many sweaters and I like wearing those so much, the cowls have been worn less, but I make a point to put on the cowl whenever I have a chance. I wear my knit socks constantly, and I just throw them in the washing machine, and I obviously treat my knits well. I wash them all by the correct instructions and stuff, but I wear the heck out of them. I do dishes in them. I cook in them. I don't know. I'm not precious about them. And so far, nothing bad has happened, and I love wearing them. And it makes me want to knit more, knowing how much I love the things I've already made. And yeah, I don't know. I think I thought at some point I would knit, so many sweaters and just be kind of like, okay, I'm good. I can take a break now. And it hasn't happened. The more I knit, the more I'm happy with them, the more I want to knit. And it's such a fun hobby, and it's so creative, and just, I haven't even scratched the surface on what there is to learn in it yet. And I feel like I'm a completely different knitter than I was 2 years ago already. And I'm excited to see what kind of knitter I'm going to be in another 2 years, following all of these same principles. So I don't know, hopefully that was interesting to you. I know a lot of these you've probably heard before, but these were the 8 things that came to my mind when I was trying to figure out how the heck I got here. Because like I said, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have seen any of this coming at all. And it would have just been I wouldn't have believed you if you told me. So, but yeah, it's just a few small changes in my life, and it really did shift quite a lot of it. So, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love how much I knit. I joke about the fact that I knit too much and that I'm too obsessed with it, but in all honesty, I love it. But anyways, I hope that was fun for you. Let me know what your tips are. What do you do that you think makes a big difference in your knitting life? What do you do to help support how much you love knitting, or, encourage you to knit more? Or I don't know, if you're one of those people like me who needs a bit more balance, maybe you have something you do to keep your balance, to keep your knitting sort of in check so that you don't do it too much. Whatever your tips are, I'd love to hear them down below. I always find just sort of the way people approach their creative hobbies to be very, very interesting. And with that, I will see you down in the comments. I hope you had some fun. I hope you got some knitting in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.